The tragic story of Romina Nunes, a mother with two children. The tragic case of Romina Nunes underscores the dire situation faced by many women globally. The World Health Organization reports that approximately 30% of women worldwide have been subjected to domestic violence at some point in their lives. Accurate statistics on such violence are challenging to maintain, primarily because numerous victims remain silent about their suffering and do not seek assistance. This silence can stem from various reasons, but the consequences are often deadly. Generally, the only reliably tracked figures are those of fatalities resulting from domestic disputes. Victims of domestic violence often fear that bringing their situation to light will worsen their circumstances, or they may feel a misplaced sense of shame, believing they are somehow responsible for the abuse. This silence and passivity ultimately empower the abuser, reinforcing his sense of entitlement and impunity. Romina Nunes' story, emerging several years ago, sent shockwaves across Spain due to its sheer brutality and the cynicism displayed by her abuser. Romina, a young woman trapped in a horrifying predicament, suffered at the hands of her husband, who physically assaulted her repeatedly. She remained silent, clinging to the hope that he would change. However, the culmination of her ordeal left even seasoned investigators aghast. Romina's body was never fully recovered, with only a part of it washed ashore by the sea. The grisly nature of these events raises pressing questions about the circumstances leading to such a tragedy and whether it could have been prevented. To understand the depth of this tragedy, it's crucial to know who Romina was and why she felt unable to share her plight. Romina Celeste Nunes Rodriguez was born in autumn 1990 in Asunción, the capital of Paraguay. She was the eldest of two daughters in a poor, working-class family where the parents had separated while the girls were young. After the separation, Romina's mother, Romina Nunes, even as a schoolgirl, took on work to support her mother and younger sister. By the age of 17, Romina was engaged in a romantic relationship with a young man named Christopher, who initially courted her with great affection. They envisioned a future together filled with plans and promises. However, their relationship took a devastating turn when Romina discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with Christopher. His reaction was swift and harsh. He presented her with an ultimatum: terminate the pregnancy or their relationship would end. Deeply wounded by Christopher's demand, Romina turned to her parents for advice. Despite the close bond she shared with them, the decision ultimately rested on her shoulders. Concerned about the potential long-term implications of an abortion on her ability to have children in the future, Romina chose to keep the baby. True to his word, Christopher severed all ties with her and expressed no interest in the life of his forthcoming child. At 18, Romina became a single mother to a son she named Lucas. The joy of her son's birth was overshadowed by the worsening financial strain on her already impoverished family. The responsibility now extended to her mother, who had to support both her daughter and grandson. Desperate to improve their dire situation and unable to find a well-paying job in Paraguay, Romina was becoming increasingly despondent. Salvation seemed to come when Romina's maternal aunt, residing in Spain, offered her a lifeline. She invited Romina to join her in sunny Spain, promising better opportunities and a brighter future than what could be hoped for in Latin America. Motivated by the prospect of a new beginning, Romina quickly gathered her essential belongings, earned enough money for a plane ticket, and embarked on her journey to Europe, leaving her 2-year-old son in the temporary care of her mother and sister. Arriving in the late summer of 2010, Romina landed in Madrid and then made her way to Alcobendas, a provincial town on the outskirts of the capital. She moved in with her aunt and immediately began job hunting, eager to establish a stable life so she could bring her son over. Luck appeared to be on Romina's side as she quickly secured a position as a hotel administrator. This job not only provided a decent salary, but also allowed her to utilize her sociable nature and attractive demeanor, marking the beginning of what seemed like a promising turn in her fortunes. Romina Nunes managed her finances judiciously. She sent part of her earnings back home to support her family and used the rest to rent her own apartment. This move was to maintain independence without imposing too much on her hospitable relatives. It was during this period of newfound stability that Romina met Javier, a man from El Salvador who, like her, had immigrated to Europe in search of better prospects. He worked in construction and exuded a serious demeanor, which drew Romina towards him, resulting in a passionate relationship. However, history repeated itself when Romina became pregnant with Javier's child. Javier, unprepared for fatherhood, created a sense of deja vu for Romina. Despite their attempts to make the relationship work, the couple separated soon after the birth of their son. Once again, Romina found herself in a daunting situation, alone in a foreign country with a newborn, unsure of her next steps. She returned to her aunt's home where she received much-needed support and assistance. The challenges continued for Romina as she navigated single motherhood in a foreign land. When her son was only 6 months old, she resumed working to support her family. However, just as she was adjusting to her new routine, Romina faced a harrowing ordeal. Initially dismissing her deteriorating health as mere stress and fatigue, a visit to the doctor revealed a shocking diagnosis: cancer. Romina underwent several rounds of chemotherapy, which led to significant hair loss and weight changes, but ultimately she triumphed over the recovering from cancer marked a new beginning for Romina. She returned to work, concealing her hair loss with wigs, and maintained a strong belief that the hardships she had endured would soon give way to happier times. Romina was captivated by Raul's distinguished charm, and when he asked her out, she eagerly accepted. Raul, almost 15 years her senior, was an accomplished process engineer at a large energy company. His past included a couple of failed marriages and 2 teenage daughters. However, Romina was undeterred by the age gap or his past. She, too, had her own complicated history, raising sons from 2 previous relationships. Their connection was instantaneous. Just one date was enough for both to feel deeply in love, desiring not to part from each other. Romina was elated, sharing with friends how joyful she was. Raul wooed her consistently with small gifts, romantic gestures, and sweet nothings, making her feel cherished. Romina believed she had finally found her true love, a man who would wholeheartedly accept her and her sons. However, troubling rumors about Raul began to surface, suggesting he had been harsh and even cruel to his previous spouses, ultimately leading to the demise of his marriages. Despite these warnings, Romina chose to disregard them, though she noticed Raul's estrangement from his ex-wives and daughters. The couple's age difference and their respective children from past relationships did not deter their growing affection. Just 6 months after their first encounter, Romina and Raul decided to move in together. They settled into a luxurious villa on the island of Lanzarote, part of the Canary Islands, which Romina thought of as a paradise. Here, she hoped to start anew, far from past troubles. Initially, the relationship seemed idyllic. They lived together with Romina's youngest son, and Raul made an effort to treat him kindly, which made Romina hopeful that he could be the ideal father figure for her boys. Raul himself promised her a long and happy life together, assuring her that she and her children would want for nothing under his care. However, the fairy tale setting on Lanzarote was short-lived. What began as a dream relationship gradually morphed into a nightmare as Raul's demeanor shifted dramatically, revealing a controlling and tyrannical side. This transformation marked the beginning of a dark period in Romina's life, contrasting sharply with the initial promises of happiness and security. Romina, deeply in love and trusting, accepted Raul's proposal to become his wife without hesitation. Raul, however, suggested they needed time alone together after the wedding to fully enjoy each other's company. Unbeknownst to Romina, he had no intention of welcoming her eldest child from Paraguay and was even contemplating ways to distance her youngest son from their lives. Despite these alarming plans, Romina dismissed the concerns of her friends, who had started to notice Raul's odd behavior. In June 2018, Raul purchased tickets for Romina and her child to visit Paraguay, but notably, he bought only one return ticket for Romina. During her visit, when Romina shared her plans with her mother and sister, they expressed skepticism about Raul's intentions, suspecting that he wanted to rid himself of his stepchildren. Romina was hurt by their doubts and quarreled with her family over it. Despite the tension, she returned to Spain, promising to return for her sons in the fall. Back in Spain, Romina was greeted warmly by Raul, and for 2 months, she experienced what seemed like blissful happiness with him. However, just days before their scheduled wedding, Raul violently assaulted Romina. The attack left her shocked and wounded, but Raul's fervent apologies and promises of never repeating such behavior convinced her to stay. Romina chose not to report the incident to the police nor confide in anyone else about the abuse. On August 10th, Romina, with makeup concealing her bruises, married Raul, the man who would tragically end her life in a cold and brutal manner. 2 weeks after their wedding, she made another. Romina's responses to her family's inquiries about her injuries were either silence or claims of accidental harm. Her extended stay at home for nearly a month shortly after getting married also raised eyebrows among her relatives. She explained that her husband had encouraged the visit, claiming he thought it important for her to reconnect with her children, whom she missed dearly. Initially, Miriam, Romina's mother, commended her son-in-law for his apparent thoughtfulness, yet she remained puzzled and concerned about her daughter's evident unhappiness. In mid-September, without her mother's knowledge, Romina had to borrow money from other relatives to buy a return ticket to Spain. Raul had refused to cover the expense, a stark indicator of the growing rift in their relationship. Despite these red flags, Romina clung to the hope that her marriage could still turn into the happy union she had envisioned. On September 17th, at the airport, her family bid her farewell, unaware that it would be the last time they would see her. Upon returning to Spain, Romina's life increasingly mirrored a horrific nightmare. Raul's behavior worsened as he no longer concealed his drug addiction, which transformed him into a dangerously abusive person. Whenever Romina attempted to leave, he would oscillate between violent episodes and moments of remorse, promising change and showering her with gifts and romantic gestures. However, the calm intervals grew shorter and the violent outbreaks more frequent and severe. As the year neared its end, Romina confided in her best friend about her deep fears for her safety, expressing a chilling premonition that Raul might eventually kill her. This fear escalated when, on December 29th, an especially brutal assault by Raul forced her to seek emergency medical attention. The hospital staff, suspecting domestic abuse, considered notifying the authorities. However, Raul intervened during the hospital visit, insisting to the staff that Romina's injuries were the result of a fall and that there was no need for police involvement. Romina, perhaps out of fear or coercion, supported his version of the events. She declined further medical treatment and returned home with him. The situation reached a dire point on January 1st, 2019, when Miriam, worried after several unsuccessful attempts to contact her daughter, kept calling Romina. There was no response. The silence was uncharacteristic and alarming, signaling that something was terribly wrong. When Miriam received no response from Romina or Raul for several days, she sent Raul a message threatening to involve the police. Raul responded immediately, explaining that he and Romina had a dispute on December 31st, after which she allegedly packed her belongings and left. He tried to reassure Miriam that Romina was simply cooling off and would return soon, as she had supposedly done before. However, Miriam remained unconvinced by her son-in-law's explanations, feeling deeply that something more sinister had occurred to her daughter. She pressed Raul to report Romina's disappearance to the police. Reluctantly, on January 8th, under considerable pressure from Romina's family, Raul filed a missing person report, but his account had altered slightly. This time, he claimed that during their argument, Romina had taken some of his money, and he suspected she might have traveled to Paraguay to visit their children. He conveyed that he hadn't been immediately alarmed until he received Miriam's call. As inconsistencies began to emerge in Raul's narrative, law enforcement grew suspicious of his continuously changing stories and contradictions. They decided to investigate more rigorously into Romina's disappearance and the couple's tumultuous marriage. After interviewing friends and relatives, it became apparent that the marriage was fraught with difficulties. Romina had confided in loved ones about being abused by Raul, though she had been vague with details, and her acquaintances had often observed bruises and abrasions on her body. To further their investigation, the police placed Raul under covert surveillance and tapped his phone calls. Despite this scrutiny, Raul became extremely cautious, managing to avoid any behavior that could incriminate him. He seemed aware that he was being watched and carefully avoided giving the police any substantial evidence against him. However, the investigation revealed that on December 29th, Romina had visited the hospital with severe injuries indicative of a beating. Witnesses reported that Raul had almost forcibly removed her from the hospital and had explicitly instructed her not to involve the police. Further digging by the investigators uncovered that Romina had once filed a report for domestic violence a few months prior, but had retracted it the very next day. As the investigation continued, a breakthrough occurred when Raul, perhaps feeling secure, revealed in a phone conversation with a relative who worked in law enforcement that Romina was dead, but according to Raul's account of the events, he claimed that on New Year's Eve, Romina became excessively drunk and belligerent. She purportedly demanded that he immediately arrange for her children to join them in their home. When he expressed his reluctance, she allegedly threw a tantrum, attacking him and hurling objects in his direction. Raul said that he left the house for a few hours to allow the situation to calm down. Upon his return, he claimed to have discovered Romina lifeless in the bathtub, presumably having suffocated due to her intoxicated state. Fearing he would be implicated in her death or accused of murder, Raul decided to conceal his involvement by erasing any evidence linked to the incident. He shockingly admitted to attempting to burn Romina's body on a barbecue in their backyard. Living in a secluded luxury complex afforded him privacy, he claimed, preventing neighbors from seeing or smelling the burning. However, his plan failed as the barbecue did not completely cremate the body. He then purportedly retrieved the remains, dismembered them, packed them into various bags, and several days later, disposed of them by casting them into the sea from a secluded part of the island. The police, along with divers, aviation support, and numerous volunteers, conducted extensive searches along the shoreline and nearby areas based on Raul's confession of where he disposed of the bags. Despite their efforts, no remnants of Romina's body were recovered. On January 16th, the situation for Raul worsened as he was formally charged with domestic violence and the murder of Romina. This followed a thorough search of his residence, where law enforcement used specialized equipment and luminol to detect traces of blood across various rooms. It was revealed during the investigation that Raul had purchased caustic soda online, a chemical known for its ability to dissolve organic material. Further investigation disclosed that Raul had excessively cleaned a bloody stain on the flooring of one room so vigorously that he damaged it and subsequently painted over it. This room is believed to be the location where he dismembered Romina's body. A broken fragment of Romina's fingernail found on the floor, alongside traces of her blood and Raul's epithelial cells, suggested that she was alive during the attack and had resisted her assailant. In the investigation of Romina's tragic death, additional compelling evidence surfaced from the bathroom, where Romina's contact lens was discovered adhered to the wall tiles, likely dislodged by a forceful blow during a violent encounter. Despite this and other signs of a struggle, law enforcement had yet to recover any of Romina's remains. The case took a turn when a tourist contacted the police station, reporting the discovery of a lung fragment on the beach. Despite Raul's continued assertions that Romina was drunk and aggressive on the night of her death, the trial concluded in June 2023 with his conviction. However, the sentence handed down by the court was seen by Romina's family and friends as insufficient given the gravity of the crimes. He was sentenced to 12.5 years for involuntary manslaughter, reflecting the jury's acceptance of his claim that he did not intend to kill Romina. Additionally, he received 2 years for the established pattern of domestic violence and 1 year for causing serious bodily harm during an incident in December 2018, which had resulted in Romina seeking hospital treatment. A further penalty was imposed for several months for the desecration of her body. The total cumulative sentence for all offenses amounted to less than 16 years in prison. This outcome sparked a sense of injustice among those who had hoped for a harsher penalty, considering the brutal nature of the crimes committed against Romina. Currently, Raul Chacon is serving his sentence, but is actively seeking to overturn the court's decision by filing appeals, continuing the legal battle, and prolonging the agony for Romina's family, who are still grappling with their loss and the aftermath of the trial.